Okay, so we got, I'd say, over 75% of the people that signed up, so I think that's a good rate to get started. If ever there's any questions, before I even start any intro, if you guys are having any issues logging in, hearing me whatsoever, let me know. There's a Q&A section right here. There's a panel on the top that you guys would be able to go and get the Q&A segment or section of the Zoom call here, so you could go in there and type in any questions that you guys have. If not, I just want to start off by saying big thanks to everyone that's joining. It's honestly awesome to see that there's so many of you that are out there. I know during these times it's really hard. Like, we're not in the office, we're not learning from others around us, or we're not really like bouncing off ideas off other people or going to see customers, going to see clients. So it's really nice to see that we could get some form of interaction in terms of all of us here in this industry. And I think this is a great way of really sharing knowledge that we're all about issues that we're all facing on a day-to-day. That being said, enough blah blah. I'm going to jump right away into the topic of today's webinar, which is streamlining the agency review process. All right. So the purpose of this meeting, or the purpose of this webinar, presentation, whatever you want to call it, is solely because we want to learn how industry experts are solving critical business issues through automation. Very nice, very fancy phrase. Essentially, the reason why you guys are here, the reason why I'm here, is that we really want to be looking at how are others solving business issues that we're all facing on a day-to-day, and how are we using automation to look at these business issues. All right. In other words, we're all facing the same type of problems. Let's see how we could solve them. So the way that we're going to tackle this, the way that we're going to tackle, or we're going to be looking at how we could streamline your review process, I'm first going to just talk about the Global Vision story. It's going to be just like a 2-minute intro here, because it's important for those of you who have never heard of Global Vision to hear a bit more about who we are, what we can do. And then for those of you who've just used or started to use Global Vision, then at least you'll get a bit more feedback in terms of how you could use it and who we really are at Global Vision. Number 2 is going to be the actual problem. So what's this critical business? What are these critical business issues that we're facing? What's the real problem out there that we're trying to solve with automation? And then number 3, we're going to talk about the solution. And finally, number 4, we're going to have the level of automation. Cool. So number 1, the Global Vision story. So it's going to be super quick here. So who are we? Global Vision is a software company that's been around for over 30 years, and we really specialize in the CPG and pharmaceutical industries, really in our beginning stage where we first kicked off as a company. With time, obviously, within the past 8 years, we've been focusing more on the supplier side of things, right? So the agency market as well as the printing industry, so that essentially it's you guys that are supplying the content, the material to the printers and CPG companies, to the pharmaceutical and CPG companies out there. Now, the solutions we offer are text, artwork, spelling, and OCR software comparisons tools. Now, I know we said, we've been around for 30 years, and our mission throughout these 3 decades has always been the same. It's to help companies like you guys get digital and printed assets to market faster without compromising quality. That's been our mission statement since day one, and it will always remain our mission statement. And it's actually why, we're here. I'm here to talk to you guys a bit more about how you guys could streamline your review process. So number 2, what's the problem? Now, I know that, we're here to talk about agencies. We're here to talk about, assets, all type of artwork revisions and whatnot. But I'm going to really get away from the idea of proofreading, of workflows. And I just want to look at this issue from a bird's eye view. All right. So what you have here on screen is, as it says, the complex lifecycle of digital and printed assets. In other words, what we're looking at here is going to be the life cycle of when we're trying to release something into the world. Now, when I'm saying something, it could be, a brochure, a website, a digital ad, but it could also be like a drug, right? Like a drug, a new vaccine, a new product. Now, no matter what you're creating, no matter which asset you're creating, it's going to go through all these stages, right? So we have to plan the project, initiate the project, develop the product, get it approved, release it, see how it does, and then bring any changes that we need. Now, where we're really going to be looking into, or where the problem that we're trying to fix here, you and I today, that problem really lies in the developing and the approval stage. So what are these stages specifically? Let's look at the relationship, let's say, between an agency, a marketing agency, and a pharmaceutical company. So the pharma company, let's say Pfizer, they're in the news today, all right? Or they've been in the news for the past week, hoping to come up with this vaccine for all of us, right? So if we look at Pfizer is going to reach out to an agency and they're going to say, hey, agency, I would like to get a brochure, a marketing brochure of my new product. All right. So they're going to come up with some content, they're going to brainstorm with the agency, and then the agency is going to be given the project and they're going to start developing the assets, right? So they're starting to develop the artwork, the content, and really just the formal brochure. And then finally, they're going to send it back to Pfizer and Pfizer is going to approve it. Now, in no world is that relationship or that communication ever so easy. It's never like, hey, here's a project, okay, it's done. There's always going to be some back and forth between the developing and the approval stage. So between the customer and the supplier, between the agency and the pharma company. And we know that in this process, the fact that there's so many back and forths between the developing and the approval stage, it makes that this process is very non-linear and heavily fragmented. All right, so I know that's super complex and it's a really a harsh way to start this webinar here today, but if we're looking at this issue from a bird's eye view, this is kind of what it looks like. Every communication that you have between your client, every communication that you have between yourself and your other departments internally and in the agency world, every time there's some sort of back and forth, there are rooms for errors to slip by and to get introduced within, you know, the documentation, the assets that you're creating. All right. In other words, instead of being all fancy, what I'm trying to say is that every time there's a back and forth between the developing and approval of a certain asset or agency, piece of marketing that an agency is creating, every time there's a back and forth, there's room for errors to be introduced within the content. Now, once agencies are going to realize this, they're going to be like, hey, like every time, you know, like I'm getting a website approval with my client, or I'm transferring, you know, this piece of content from the editorial to the artwork stage, there always seems to be some errors that are slipping by. So the natural reaction is like, okay, let's just start proofreading our work. So let's get our editorial folks to really reread their work. Let's get our artwork guys to really be checking their artwork over and over again to make sure that, you know, it's done right the first time. But we know that doing this manually and relying on humans to do this, first of all, it takes a lot of time. Like obviously automation is going to help in terms of saving time, but even just an individual, like even yourself, just reading the slide here takes a lot of time. Now, also proofreaders, if you're hiring external proofreaders, or if you know you're getting your own staff to proofread their own work, you know that they're going to be prone to fatigue. And then finally, if they're prone to fatigue and it's taking a lot of time, there's still going to be errors that are going to slip by. And this is just going to lead to another revision. So excessive amount of revisions. And finally, to potential recalls, right? If a product goes out there in the market and there's a spelling mistake in it, it will get recalled, which is very costly. All right. So where am I trying to go with this? Why am I, you know, depicting this problem? Is just to make you guys realize that we're all in the same boat. We're all out here in the same type of agency workflow where, you know, we're trying to streamline it as best as we can in the best ways that we could come up with. But there's ways, all right, but no matter what we do, there's always going to be errors that are going to slip by on the content. So what's the solution? What's the solution in terms of filling in these gaps here? The real solution that we're going to talk about today is automation. All right. Now, this screen here, the slide that I have up on the screen here, is really just to show you that all types of companies, no matter if you're on the life science, consumer side, agency, or printer side, we're all facing the same issues. We're all trying to release content, we're trying to release products out there in the market without having any errors. And because of this, we really need to start all working together, and we are all working together, right? Because if you look at, you know, just this relationship here on the top, the life science companies are out there. Their goal is to release products, release drugs, release, you know, medical devices out there in the world that are, you know, have all the instructions that are written properly, that follow the FDA regulations, that have no mistakes. And then the agencies are creating products. You guys are creating content for these life science companies or these pharma companies. And you also got to make sure that whatever you guys are creating also is error-free. So what I'm trying to get at is that we're all in the same boat no matter where you stand. And our mission or what we're trying to solve with automation is to make sure that we have no errors as we're streamlining our review process. So specifically, talking about the agencies, as I just said there, the main mission and the main topic of today's webinar is we're going to be talking about how could you guys, the agencies out there, streamline your review process, aka how could you guys start automating your proofreading tasks. Now, proofreading is a term that some people use, some people don't use. Proofreading could also be just seen as like review or a reread or just checking your overall content to make sure there's no mistakes in it. All right. So that's a super heavy intro. If ever you guys have any questions at this point, there is once again, a Q&A section where you could post your questions there, and at the end, I will get to it. All right. So again, if you guys are just joining, you're jumping in at a great section. We're going to be moving over now into the actual guts, the actual content of today's webinar, which is where we're going to be talking about automation or automating your proofreading tasks to streamline your agency review process. So the first question is my favorite. It's why, right? So sometimes when I'm approaching an agency and I'm like, hey, you guys should start proofreading, or you guys should use Global Vision to automate to start streamlining, your tasks. They'll be like, okay, why? So here's a couple of reasons why. The first reason you would want to automate your review cycles or your reviewing tasks is that you want to cut down revision time, right? Like we saw this in the previous slide. If you're getting your own staff or you're getting humans to start re-reviewing their own work, it takes a lot of time. With automation, you could obviously automate those tasks, and naturally you will save time. Now, once you're cutting down on revision times, it's obviously or automatically or naturally, I guess I could say, it's going to reduce your project delays because you're not focusing some time now on reviewing your work, and you're really just focusing on making the work the best it can be. You're making the best content in your agency for your client. So you're ultimately just focusing properly on what you got to do, which is going to reduce project delays. Obviously, you're going to be avoiding human error. We can never trust the human eye, never trust your own eyes. I think we've all had personal examples of this, right, at some point in our lives. So automation will really allow you to avoid human error. Another reason why you want to automate is that it's going to ultimately reduce unbillable hours, right? If your editorial department is really working on, their content and, really what their tasks are on a day-to-day, and they're not having to re-review their work or proofread their own work, ultimately, everything that they're doing is billable hours, right? So by using automation, by automating your proofreading tasks, you're going to be able to reduce unbillable hours. And I'll show you a bit more about that in a second. Finally, we have automating the revision checks, which is pretty obvious. So what you'll get to do is that instead of manually comparing a first revision to a second revision, you could do that automatically. Another reason why you want to streamline your process and why you want to automate your proofreading tasks is to meet pharmaceutical standards, right? We're all out there, many agencies, I should say right now, there's a big trend where, agencies are doing a lot of work for medical companies. So make sure that we're meeting their standards, which are the FDA standards, essentially. And then finally, why you would want to automate and why you want to streamline your own process internally is just for brand integrity. You don't want to be that agency that has that reputation out there that's like, hey, yeah, you're the agency that did this work for this project or this client, and there was an error that happened in there and I don't know, it got like published or something, right? So here's just a couple reasons as to why you, first of all, should be listening to the webinar here today, but also why you want to start looking at where could you automate your proofreading or your review tasks. So we talked about the why, now let's talk about the where. So where could you start automating as of today? It's in these departments. Now, obviously there's way more departments, but these are the main ones that we usually help, or we come in terms of implementing automation. So the first one is the create a copy stage. So the create a copy stage this is really the section where we're coming up with the content that will be placed within our artwork or, within, websites or whatever we're trying to create for our clients. So at the create a copy, what we're doing here is that we really only have one document, right? Since we're coming up with the wording, we're coming up with the paragraphs and, the overall messaging and pitches, right? So this is where we would run a spelling inspection to be checking for basic spelling mistakes. The second and most popular area to start proofreading your own content is going to be the editorial or creative copy stage or department. So this is when, in editorial, we're dealing with multiple revisions of the same pamphlets, brochures, content. And essentially what we want to automate is that comparison between all the revisions. So create a copy, editorial, which brings us now to the art stage or the graphic stage or the design stage, which is essentially where we're coming up with the graphs, the images, the logos. And what we want to do is that when we're creating these artwork pieces, we want to make sure that they're identical from one revision to the other as well. And then the last stage will be the customer stage. So this is just to give you like that extra sense of confidence before you're releasing your content that you've created as an agency back to your customer when you're sending it for approval to your customer. You just want to make sure that it's meeting their standards. So you could also automate the proofreading tasks at that stage. So these are 4 different departments or 4 different segments in which you could look at for automating proofreading tasks within your agency to ultimately streamline that process. So what can you do? What could you automate in terms of inspections? What we say at Global Vision often is that people are going to use, softwares like ours to automate tasks of proofreading within presentations, screenshots, brochures, packaging design, websites, emails, uh, PowerPoints like we talked about in the presentations, mobile websites, actual websites, etc. So what you want to be looking at in terms of inspecting and automating would be some of the following. And finally, the last question is how. Now, essentially it's like I've kind of convinced you why you should be automating your proofreading task or streamlining your process. We looked at where you could do it. We looked at what you could do it on. Now let's look at how could you actually do it. So you could do it with these 4 tools that we offer here at Global Vision. The first one is going to be the spell check. So when we're on the content stage where we're coming up with the content and we're really coming up with the words, the paragraphs, the proper wording that's going to be placed within, our brochure, website, or matched with the artwork later down the road. When we have that one document, we could run a spell check, and I'll show you that later. The second tool that you might want to be using is optical character recognition or OCR tool that essentially allows you to take screenshots and convert them into text and actually being able to inspect that text afterwards. We're also going to look at a text compare tool so that you could compare documents, compare revisions automatically, focusing only on the text. So, was the text, translated properly? Was the text, what did it go from italic to bold? Was the text deleted, misplaced, etc.? And then finally, we have an artwork compare. So this is anything when you guys have like pictures or images or graphs or artwork designs that you want to be comparing one-to-one. We also have a tool that we're going to be looking at that you could use to automate those tasks as well. Cool. So specifically diving into the how, now that you know the tools that are a bit more available for you guys, how could you actually apply them within your process? The first thing would be that you're running a cold read. So this is the single document inspection. So this is where you could use the spelling inspection tool, and I'll show you that in a second. Another way that you could start automating will be by comparing the previous revision to the newly created one. So some agencies will call this old to new. So that's another stage where you could start automating. Also just comparing the final revision. So once you have the final revision, let's say an editorial or the final revision before your client, it's making sure that we're comparing that back to an approved version. And then also we have comparing overall projects before department transfers, right? So within agencies, you guys have multiple departments where, the content is essentially going from one department to the other. Let's say your editorial and you're sending it to the development team, make sure that your work is done properly before you send it over to their team. All right. So that was kind of like a long, I guess, like intro or kind of just like a stage where I like to do that in the beginning just to set the scene so that we can really jump into the idea of automation. So again, for those of you who are just tuning in, all right, or that are tuning in or out and you have any questions at this point, there is a Q&A section where you guys could type in your questions. I will get to them at the end. So quick recap, what have we done so far? We looked at the overall issue. We looked at where agencies could actually start automating, and we're now going to jump into number 4, which is automation. So what I'm going to show you here on screen, or what we're going to do for the following, what are we at? We're at 2:20, yeah. For the following 20, 25 minutes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the actual Global Vision platform, all right? And in this platform, I'm going to show you how you could start actually automating the content checks that we just talked about or that I just introduced within this slide here. All right, so let me jump to that right away. So I just want to make sure that I am sharing my screen properly. Excellent. So this is it. Welcome to automation. Welcome to the Global Vision solution here. I'm not here to sell you the solution. I'm not here to tell you like, hey, Global Vision is going to be the best fit here, but I do have access to the tool, obviously being part of Global Vision and the team. So what I do want to do is I'm going to show you the tool or use this tool to show you how you could actually automate at all those stages that we looked at, from the creating the copy stage, the editorial, to the art team. Cool. So the first thing we're going to look at is the cold read. So when I have that piece of content or when I'm coming up with the initial content for my project. So what I'll do is I'll load here a first file, and let's load a file like this here. So simple PDF document where really all I have is just pure content, pure text, all right, and numbers and data. So we could see here that I have a 3-page document, All right, that's literally just words, graphs, and all the content that obviously I'm going to be taking in my next stage or my next, department within my agency, and I'm going to be placing that with my artwork. Now, before I do that, I just want to make sure, like, okay, before I create another copy of this, another revision, is everything within this document good enough? So what I could do is I could run a first spelling inspection to automate my cold read. So what I want to do is, okay, first of all, which language is this in? English USA, and I click inspect right here. So essentially what I'm doing here is that I'm automating the spelling inspection or the cold read inspection of my document. And what we're going to see is that I'm going to have a list here of all the differences that are not identified, as part of the English USA dictionary or of my medical dictionary that's also embedded in the software here. So obviously TNF does not mean much to any of us, right? So all of these are actual mistakes that are being picked up by the software. Cool. Now, you might be like, hey, Will, like, okay, these are mistakes that obviously are not part of the English dictionary, but, maybe they're part of my brand, or maybe they're part of, the drug name or the product that I'm working on, right? Or that I'm creating content for. Not a problem, all right? Essentially, what you want to do there, if you don't want, let's say TNF, it's been here a couple times, it's probably part, of my brand or of my research study here. And let's say that I'm going to be running this inspection again, I'm going to be running, a piece of documentation that's going to have TNF in it again, and I don't want the software to flag it as a mistake. So where you could also automate on top of your automation, you could right-click on this and add this to your dictionary. So if you add this to your dictionary, every time you're going to run the inspection, this word here, TNF, will not be flagged anymore. So you guys could actually start building your own current dictionary, according to the types of brands or products that you're working with. So, some of the agencies that are using Global Vision on a large deployment, that's what they do, right? Some of them work just for Pfizer, just for AbbVie, just for another company. And really, they have their own dictionaries built per company that they work for or with. Cool. So I feel like I'm talking a lot. I feel like I said a lot, but obviously that's the goal of the webinar, is to give you guys as much information. So what we just talked about there is how could you automate the cold read using a software like this? So load the document, run a spelling inspection, and see what comes up. Now, sometimes the cold read won't necessarily be like a PDF document. Maybe it's going to be a screenshot or an email, or maybe just like a website. All right. And oftentimes, if we are inspecting some of those pieces of content that I just talked about there, what we're going to be doing is, as I said, we're going to be taking a screenshot of it. So in this case here, let's just say that I took a screenshot of the website here. So here's kind of like the top banner of a website over here. So what I did is that I literally, like I said, took a screenshot, with the snippet tool. And what we're seeing here is that if I click inspect, I can't actually run the inspection. Right? Now, this will be with Word, this will be with any type of spelling inspection software that you use out there. And the reason why you can't run this inspection is because you need to be able to have live text. So I'm not going to jump into, the details of what live text is, but essentially this text is not actually text. It's only pixels. And that makes sense, right? Because I took a screenshot here. I didn't copy paste the information, I took a screenshot. So it's not the end of the world. What I could do is that I could tell the software, okay, check in this area here, check which part of this screenshot actually has letters or actually has content. And what I could do is I could use this optical character recognition tool, or OCR tool. And what it's going to do is that it's now going to be reading all of my words, all of my letters, and it's going to identify these pixels to a specific letter. So as you can see here, it read, our products, and it actually found all the letters separately. And now if I click inspect, I've just automated a cold read of a screenshot of a website or of an email or whatever you're screenshotting. That's the power of automation. So now center was misspelled, research was misspelled, and was also misspelled. So that's the power of automation when it comes to a cold read. You could run a spelling inspection on pretty much any type of documentation that you introduce to the software. All right. So there's a first big chunk. So, if I went back to my slides here, the segment that we just covered is how could you start automating your proofreading? Well, we looked at this first section here, which is going to be the cold read, a single document inspection. So the next segment I'm going to jump into is going to be exactly this one that's here, comparing a previous revision to a newly created one. So what does that mean specifically? That means that let's say that I had let's use the same documents here. I had my first revision that, I just inspected and it was clean, I corrected all the mistakes. And then I had another revision of the same piece of document. So again, if you're not catching on the left, I have one document, on the right, I have another document. Now they're the same doc, just two different revisions. We could see 3 pages and 3 pages. So now my task would be that, okay, I need to zoom in and I need to start proofreading, right? So I just got to make sure that everything that I've typed into my own document here was spelled or typed in correctly. So instead of doing that, load the files into a software like this and then click inspect. What the software is going to do, or this is the text comparator tool specifically, what the software is going to do is that it's going to be looking at only the words and the letters, and it's going to compare those to make sure that they are a perfect match. So what we're seeing here is that we found 33 differences, and I'm now going to analyze what are these differences. So difference number 1 was a type, the type of difference that we found was a change. And I have the master and the sample views here. So reaction was with a 2 and then reaction was with a 1 here. Now, obviously I got, the preview on, that's really nice here on the bottom to show me where that difference happened. And my personal favorite is that I have a yellow highlight here that actually highlights in yellow where that difference happened. All right, so difference number 2, we can see that I went from, regular text to italic text. So again, was that intentional? Was it not intentional? No matter what, the software will pick it up for you. The word here, enrolled, was changed to asked. Now, why was it changed? Maybe for a marketing reason, I'm not sure. And again, we had a change difference here. So we could see that, the SJS was switched around to JSS. And we could see that, highlighted in yellow, it's going to show me which letters actually swapped around. Cool. Now, there's a bunch of ways that you could filter through these results. So you could click on type here to actually just organize them or group them by type of differences. So you could look at all your bold differences first, and then your change differences, and then your deletions and italics. You could also filter which type of differences you want to see and not see as well. So these are all the types of differences you could look at with Global Vision. Cool. So this is really the comparison. This is the automation of the comparison of between 2 text files. So where I'm really just looking at the text information, also known in the industry as old to new. Or if you're in the editorial stage or the artwork or development stage, when you guys are working in Workfront or Viva or whatever artwork management system you're using, whenever you're comparing all those revisions from like 1 to 46, this is what you could do with the software. Just load those revisions in there and let the software inspect it for you or inspect them for you. Now, another cool thing you could do with this text inspection is that those documents don't need to be similar. So let's say I had a Word document here from my copy stage. And then on the right side here, I had the actual artwork or brochure that was finally created with all the artwork. In other words, what I have on the left here is I have all of my information, words or paragraphs or content that was actually placed within my artwork here. So now what I could do with Global Vision is I could also automate this task. All I need to tell the software is, hey, this is a different layout. So what I could do here is, okay, it's a different layout, and I click inspect. So now what you're going to see is that we're actually taking a Word document from its own layout, and we're going to automatically compare it to a PDF that had its own layout as well. And we're actually comparing the content to make sure it's a match. So we could see correctly, the period was dropped off. Ibuprofen was misspelled on the right side. Stomach, was uncapitalized and then capitalized, and tip was changed to warning. Cool. So there's a quick summary, a quick explanation in terms of like how you could use tools like this to automate that second stage of your agency review process, which is, as we saw on screen, comparing the previous revision to a newly created one, really only focusing on the text. Now, a question I get here is like, okay, well, like you just showed us how to inspect text, but what about all the artwork, right? Like, how do I know if, the drawing here was done properly and if, there wasn't any mistakes? How do I know that I was only supposed to have 1 pill here and maybe not 2 pills? So this is where we use the second tool, or the third tool actually I'm going to talk about, which is what we call a graphic inspection. It could also be known as a compare or an artwork comparison as well. So let's say now that, I just approved this first file, and now I'm at the artwork stage or the editorial stage, and I have a second revision of that file. So on the left, I have my first, and on my right, I have my second. Now what I want to do is that, I know that the text will be fine, but if I want to check the text again, I could go back to our previous tool, hit same layout, and then click inspect. So again, even if I'm dealing with artwork or brochures or, PDFs like this, I could still be checking the text information, no problem. But what about the artwork? What about, the graphs in here? Or what about the logos in here? So all you got to do is click the graphic inspection, which is a pixel to pixel comparator. So what that is going to do is that instead of reading the text, it's going to compare all the pixels one by one and match them and make sure that they are a perfect match. And like that, we're going to be picking up mistakes. So that period that dropped off, we're picking it up here again, right? And hey, talking about that pill missing, look at that here. On the left side, I had this extra pill. On the right side, that pill was actually not introduced within my artwork. Now, was that intentional? Was it not intentional? It really depends on you guys. Some agencies will use this to make sure that errors are not happening. Some agencies will use this to make sure that errors or changes are happening, right? Because maybe, it was an artwork decision or a marketing decision to not include that pill in this revision. So, if I'm the artwork creator or the editorial guy and I'm like, hey, my job was to remove the pill, did I actually remove it? Well, we could see that, yes, actually you did. Now, some people don't like this flash mode, so let me just show you what it looks like without the flash mode. So you can see that, hey, indeed, right? Over here, I had the pill, and then on the right side, I did not have that pill. Cool. So what we could see here, the E was changed to the A as well. We could see here that there's literally like some sort of symbol in this figurine's chest here that was also removed. I'm assuming this means heartburn. So let me put you back to flash mode so you guys could see that. All right, and then tip and warning, as we saw, there was also switched around. Cool. So I know I talked a lot there, but what I'm trying to explain to you guys is that no matter what type of content that you have, if it's text, artwork, or graphs or images, we will be able to cover you from it. You will be able to cover yourselves by using tools like this to automate, all types of inspections when it comes down to this stage. Cool. So if I go back to my slides, what we kind of just covered there is that we looked at, okay, how could you automate a cold read? How could you compare a previous revision to a new revision? How could you compare a final revision to, a previous original copy as well? All right. So the last thing that I just want to talk about, or that I briefly want to talk about, is that now that, you're running inspections, how do you actually communicate back that you ran these inspections properly? Because, we've seen it, like I said, we have over 80, like I've personally had quite a bit of experience working with different agencies when it comes to implementing tools like this for automation. And I know that most of the times you guys are working out of like an AMS system, an artwork management system, right? If it's Pulse, if it's, like I said, Viva, if it's Workfront, or if it's an Adobe product, right? So when you guys are working out of there, there's tasks that are given to you. And, essentially like that example I was using there with the pill, sometimes tasks are given to you where it's like, hey, like take off that pill or remove this letter or change this word for this word. And you need to make sure that, first of all, you are doing those changes, but also you need to communicate that the changes were done properly. And there's tools within Global Vision that allow you to automate those tasks as well. So let's go back to this information panel. I'm going to rerun the same inspection here. And what we're going to do is that essentially I want to get back to that preview panel. So this is the preview panel where, the differences were found. So now what I could do is that I could double click on this difference here, and automatically I get kind of like this common pop-up box that shows up, where I could associate a level of how critical this error was or this difference was. So let's say it was critical, major, minor, or ignore. You could do that. Or if you're using it in the real agency workflow, which is making sure that the right changes were done, you could type in a comment as well. So, so pill was removed as demanded. Cool. And let's just say, right, we'll leave it like that. So I could click X and we could see now that I have a sticky note near that error that shows that I actually commented on that error. And then what you could do is you could generate a report. Now this report is going to be a summary of the inspection that we just did here today. So you could fill in this info if it's useful for you, if it's useful for your organization. So you could put in a product ID, let's just call it test for now, and a product name, and then a lot number as well. And then what you could do is click view. Pass or fail, it was a pass. And now what I'm launched to is my PDF viewer here in Acrobat, where I could actually see the types of differences that are popping up. So the first thing I'm going to see is that it's going to have a summary of all the information about the files that I used. I'm going to get a preview of my file. And then I'm going to get a preview of where those boxes were, of where the actual differences were found. So remember that period, the pill, right? So all of this gives me kind of like a bird's eye view again of the differences found in the document. And then finally, what we're seeing here is that we're going to be able to get screenshots of the individual differences that were found, if they were intentional or not. And like we did here, remember how we added the comment? So you're seeing that the pill, the before, the after, the preview, or the difference view. And then finally, we have the comments that we added together here. And now you guys have the ability of taking this report, dumping it into your AMS system, into the comments, or communicating that to the next department or next person that will work on that file. And like that, all questions will be answered in terms of, did you do the work properly or did you actually do the intended changes? All right. So that's pretty much it in terms of what I really wanted to cover with you guys today. Specifically, the goal of today of the webinar is to make sure that you guys are understanding that there are tools out there that allow you to streamline your agency review process, aka automate all types of proofreading jobs, tasks, revisions that you need to do on a day-to-day. Now, I am cutting it a bit short, even though there's 20 minutes left, because we do have a bit of questions that I want to get to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to stay here with you guys, and I'm going to open up the Q&A section, and I'm going to start answering any questions. Now, if you guys have any questions as of now, in addition to the ones that you've already written, feel free to write them in the Q&A section. All right, so go ahead, take 2 minutes, start writing your questions, and I'm going to get to them right away. Cool. All right, we've got quite a bit here, so let's jump into it. So the first one the question that I have here is, and I'm going to read them out loud so that you guys know what I'm talking about and what I'm answering, obviously, as well. So the first one is, do you need a certain resolution on, say, a screenshot to be able to use the OCR feature? In other words, the first question that we have here, guys, is that to use that OCR tool where, the optical character recognition tool, do I need to have a specific resolution for the file? The higher the resolution, the better. That's usually going to be the answer there. So obviously, if you have too low res of a file, the software will have a harder time to detecting the actual letters, or even, the commas or the periods, right? So I don't know the minimum stat or the minimum resolution. I can't give you a number, but the higher the resolution of your screenshot or of the file that has, the outline text in it, the better it will be in terms of OCR results. So that's the first question we have. So the second question we have, which is a classic, will there be a recording of this webinar available to you guys? And the answer is yes, of course, as always. So there will be a recording. It will be posted up on our website. And I'll also just personally reach out to everyone that joined the session here today with the webinar recording link. So the next question that I have is, how do you check documents that is multilingual? That's a great question. So the first way that we could look at in terms of documents that have multiple languages, if we're looking at the cold read, so where we ran the spelling inspection, let me open that back up here. So if I open up the software here once again, the question again for those of you who missed it is, how do I inspect a document that has multiple languages? So let's say I ran I was trying to run a cold read on this document here. And let's say that this document here had English, French, and Spanish, okay? So the first thing that I want to do is that, obviously the profile that I'm using here, the dictionary, if I'm running English and I run the inspection on this entire document, I'm going to get a bunch of false positives because or wrong differences, because I'm going to be inspecting using an English dictionary on Spanish or English dictionary on French. So what you could do is that you could actually isolate different areas within your document. So how do we do that? What you're going to do here is that you're going to have a zoning tool. So the zoning tool, what it's going to allow you to do is that you're going to be able to zone an area okay, that you want to inspect. Now that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it as well is that you could also use the marquee tool. It's honestly the same thing. So what the marquee tool is going to do for you is that it's going to isolate the area that you want to inspect. So now if I click inspect on this, what I did is that I literally just inspected that one area and I had no differences there. So then what I would do, let's say this pain relief section, okay, was in a different language. I would move my box down to here. And now what I would tell the software is, hey, just inspect this area, but now I would choose, let's say French, because let's say this was a French section. So that's how you could run a cold read or a spelling inspection on documents that have multiple different languages. Now, if for some reason you were comparing two documents, all right, let's restart this. Let me just relaunch the software here. So if for some reason you had two documents that had, a bunch of different languages within, so let's say the example we were using before here was these two files. So what you could do is that you could do the same idea of isolation, all right, in terms of comparison, but using the marquee tool within the comparison here. So same thing I showed you there. Instead of using the spelling inspection, you could use the text inspection, and you could really start isolating areas that you want to inspect in specific languages. So what you could do here is use the text compare tool, hit inspect, and it's really only going to inspect this section here and compare it to the other side. Cool. I know that was kind of like a wavy or or kind of broken up explanation there, but really the idea is that you really want to isolate your document per language that you're inspecting. Cool. If you have any additional questions about that, just let me know. And I just realized I was not sharing my screen when I showed you guys that. So let me just show you that here. So what I meant is just a text comparison like this. What you could do is you could isolate different areas like this and then run inspect, and it's really only going to be looking within that area. Okay, now I will stop my share. A lot to manage here as a host. All right, and I'll move on to the next section. Could you build multiple internal dictionaries with the add to dictionary function as a separate dictionary for each brand that you're working on? Can these dictionaries be shared among team members? So this will really vary in terms of what version of Global Vision that you're using. For the time being, you could really only be building your own library, and that library, depending on how you have it set up, either that library will be shared among your users or will it really just be personal to your computer. If this question came from someone that's a current user of Global Vision, just reach out to me personally. We'll look at what your setup is. But there is a bunch of possibilities and also of customization when it comes to saving your dictionary. But usually it is one dictionary per person. Another question I got is there a function to fine-tune the OCR accuracy? The only way that you could get different results or even more precise results with the OCR is just being more precise with how you're using the marquee tool, aka how much of an area do you actually want to be OCRing at the same time. So let me share my screen here again to show you guys what I mean. So if I bring you back to the Global Vision software here, and let's say that I went back to that screenshot that we used for the OCR demo. If I, use a marquee section, all right, let's say that I wanted to marquee this entire section like this, I'll be pretty precise because it's not that large of an area that I need to OCR. But if I want it to be even more precise and I want to fine tune the OCR and make it very precise, I'm just going to make my area relatively smaller. So like that, I'm giving more odds for the OCR tool or the OCR software to be more powerful within only that area. Okay? So that was the question that was specifically, is there a function to fine tune the OCR accuracy? The next question is, once that I'm done the OCR, now that I have the OCR results, can I do a spell check? Of course, that's what we showed that you there. So you could take a screenshot, marquee it, run the OCR, and then run a spelling inspection. Cool. Another question I have is, with the graphic comparison, is digital standard profile to use? I definitely feel like you're a user here asking these questions, which is awesome. So yes, whenever you are running that graphic comparison or the artwork comparison tool that we were talking about, there is different profiles that are groups of settings that you want to use. If you want to be the most precise as you can, use the digital profile. Next question. Do you need a certain resolution, say screenshot, to be able to use the OCR feature? So we actually answered that question originally. Um, so like I said, there is no number that I could give you in terms of which resolution you actually need to run the OCR tool. It usually works with pretty much any resolution, but obviously the higher the number, the more accurate your results will be. Cool. All right, so the list will go on here. If you guys have any additional questions, all right, feel free to ask them and we'll go on with them. So a next question I have is, again, which departments in which would you be able to use a tool like this to automate? We kind of talked about it before. The main departments that we use are going to be the create a copy department. The second department will usually be the editorial. That's usually the most popular department to deploy solutions like this. If not, we'll also have like the creative lead or also the development stage where they're creating the actual artwork. Okay, more questions are loading in here. So how many agencies are using this right now? Obviously, I can't disclose the information of how many agencies are using this. What I can tell you is that we've been working with agencies for over 8 years. The idea of automation in terms of proofreading tasks or editorial tasks or revision tasks is fairly new to the industry. Um, Obviously, we have a lot of large deployments. So there's some large industry agencies based out of New York, based out of Orlando, also based out of Illinois that are using this tool, and then also some agencies in Europe. If ever you guys are from that side of the globe, I doubt it with the time zone that we have this webinar at right now, but there's also some deployments there. So if you guys ask around, or even if you want to ask me on a personal basis in terms of like, maybe is your current company actually using this tool, or maybe if a competitor of yours or a neighbor of yours is also using this tool, feel free to ask me personally after the webinar, send me an email, and I'll be able to answer that for you. Awesome. Another question, how do you get started? That's a pretty good question. Again, all my contact info will be shared with you. I'll be emailing all of you guys personally after. So you'll have my contact info there. If not, just go on our website, request a demo, and we'll get you guys started from there. It's pretty easy. Cool. In terms of licensing, so that's a great question. This is where we could get really technical. In terms of all types of deployment, this is a desktop platform, so it is installed on your computer. And then there's a bunch of different licensing options. So you guys could own your own licenses. You guys could share your own licenses. So if you guys are interested in terms of like how we could license this out, feel free again, message me. We could look at what your needs are specifically and get you going there. So how accurate is the text inspection tool with longer documents? So, the examples that I used here are really short documents, right? So I use like 1 to 3 pages. Now, obviously, most agencies or most companies using this will be using this with text documents that are up to 50 pages, right? The only thing you'll notice there is that the inspection time might be slower. So instead of taking like 20 seconds, it might take up to a minute, right? Depending on how many pages you insert within the software. Cool. Um, Another question we have here, which AMSs do we integrate with? So this platform right now does not actually integrate within any AMSs. So we could really help you and consult in terms of how we could fit this into your workflow so that it works or that is at least compatible with your AMS system. Moving forward though, we are developing on a new tool that hopefully in the near future we will be able to integrate within your own artwork management systems. Another question, how strong is the spell check feature via grammar? In terms of grammar, we are using, the latest English dictionary. I would have to pull up for you which dictionary we are using specifically, but it is very precise in terms of like we're using the English dictionary as well as a medical dictionary. I could get you both of those um, in terms of what are the actual names. So that's really going to be for spelling errors. In terms of like grammar mistakes, if you're comparing two documents, we'll be picking up those changes, but the spelling inspection tool does not pick up grammar mistakes yet. So like a tool like we'll find online like Grammarly nowadays, that's great. That's something that we're looking to implement within the future within tools like this. For the time being, it's really just spelling mistakes. Awesome. So I see that more are loading in as I speak. If you guys have any other additional questions, let me know. I see that quite a few are still here in the attendees, which is great. Awesome. So how do we inspect websites? Okay, good question. So how could you inspect websites? At the time being, there's no like URL plugin, so you can't just like plug and play a URL and hope that the inspection is going to work. But what a lot of agencies are doing right now is that they're doing screenshots. So the screenshot example that I used with the OCR tool in the beginning there, what we actually did there is you literally just use your snippet tool, or if you're on Mac, you know, use your shortcuts, you do the screenshot, drag it in Global Vision, run the OCR tool, run a spelling inspection, and you're good to go. So that's how we could currently inspect websites. Cool. So I think that's it in terms of the questions that I have. Like I said, if you guys have any other additional questions, or you're just curious about the tool, or if you want to get going with the tool, or if you're just even curious about the slides that I was talking to you guys about in terms of like, you know, what's the issues and how we solve these issues with automation, feel free to reach out to us. If you go through the website, you'll probably get wired back through me. If you go, you know, through our emails, you know, you'll get back in touch with me. No problem there. If not, at the end of this, I will be sending a general webinar email or webinar follow-up email to all of you guys there. And if you have any additional questions, just feel free to reply to there. That being said, I really wish all of you guys a great day. I hope all of you are staying safe, sorry. And if you have any additional questions, just feel free to let me know. So on that note, thanks everybody, and I'll be ending the webinar as we speak.